Hi Year 10 and welcome back. Another week and only about 3 more poems to do. So we've got the Emigree. We still need to do John Agard's poem, Checking Out My History, and we also need to do Kamikaze, and after that we've done all of the poetry. I'm going to do a few more lessons at the end of this on how to compare and just to make links between the poems, because I want to set you guys up so when we come back all I need to do is teach you guys how to write the essay, and you should already be starting to make links between these poems. Now, to get us started for today, I want to do a little bit on the poem's context in terms of where the poem comes from. So, the Emigree, first of all, 1993 collection, and the collection it's from is called Thinking of Skins, and you can already tell that's going to be about that's collection of poetry is going to have a focus on identity, where people fit in, where people feel they belong. So I'm just going to make that so you can see my blue writing first. So if we see there, Thinking of Skins. Okay, and it's a collection all about the idea of belonging and identity, which is what I would take from that title. Now, I'm going to take you back over here so we can see this. Excuse me while I make this clear. Now, where I want to start today is also the meaning of the title itself. So, when we're talking about the title, and I'm going to look at the connotations here for Emigree. An emigree is somebody who's forced to move from one place to another, sometimes for political reasons. One country, I should say. So we might just turn that into country. Now, when we're looking at the whole idea of a country, so of course what this is about, this person is a refugee, but in particular, somebody who's political refugee. There's an implication here with Emigree of it being a political refugee. So, first of all, a couple of things I want you to focus on for this poem. First of all, it compares really nicely with a couple of poems, but in particular, the idea of tyrants and tyranny, it makes it link really nicely with London, but the imagery to do with light makes it also fit really nicely with tissue. So I want to start, as we're going through, and I'm going to read through it, and as we're reading through, what I'm going to ask you to look at, and what I'm going to try and pick out where we see these images coming up. Now, the poem begins by almost this fairy tale. There once was a country. So do you notice how it begins with that sort of like a fairy tale aspect? This is a child's memory. That there once was, that's how fairy tales begin. So it gives us the idea that this country which she's seeing, sorry, that colour's not showing up very well there. Let's see if I can get, that works. Okay. There we go. So we get this idea here of something which is a child's. So it's not a real vision of a country. So it's like a story. Her country seems to be something from a story. Now, so this implies a loss of memory. So we come over here. I left it as a child, but my memory of it is sunlight clear. And I want you to start looking and a highlight as we're going through here, the imagery to do with light. And again, like in some of the other poems we've had, okay, we have this light, but look at it, sunlight. So we've got this idea of warmth, hope, and look at the contrast between the light and darkness as we come through this poem. So it starts with, my memory of it is sunlight clear, for it seems I never saw in that November which I'm told comes to the mildest city. So basically November is associated with darkness, but she doesn't see it. I never saw it in that November which I am told comes to the mildest city. So this is a season of darkness, change. It's the beginning, like it's that last part where it's the beginning of winter and it's the darkness. November is usually associated with things dying, aging. And the reason that is, of course, because it's one of the in the later months of the year. So it's this whole idea of dying, darkness. So we've already got a contrast here between this childlike image. Okay, and I'm going to keep the pink for the childlike imagery. Which tells us that maybe her vision of what her country's like isn't really true. It's what she imagines and what she remembers. And it's this whole idea of something which is she's got moments. It's not a proper big memory. It's these children's memories. The worst news I receive of it cannot break my original view. The bright, filled paperweight. So look at this here, bright. Again, that whole idea of light there coming through with that warmth and hope. I'm going to keep that going through. It may be at war, it may be sick with tyrants, but I am branded by an impression of sunlight. So again, all these ideas of being owned by hope, light. There is hope for her country. Her memories are happy or positive. Now, if you contrast that with what is actually there. Now, we saw at the top there with Emigree linked to this refugee, somebody who's also left off an E there, political refugee. And this is where we get this reference here. It may be at war, it may be sick with tyrants. So we've got this idea here, the country is personified as ill, sick with tyrants. So remember, tyrants, cruel rulers, like Macbeth. Dictators. And that's, look at the contrast we've got coming here. We've got this contrast between cruelty and this reality and her memories. Remember, she lives it as a child. She's might not have the big view of everything that's going on. Her memory is like a paperweight. So think of it like those glass balls people sit on their desk. It glows almost because of the light passing through it. The white streets of that city, the graceful slopes, glow even clearer as time rolls its tanks and the frontiers rise between us close like waves. Again, look at the sense of light. These are white streets that glow. So again, this feeling of light, again in contrast. Time rolling its tanks. And frontiers. So again, we've got this idea of walls, barriers being shut off. So the tanks are associated, of course, with, so time rolling its tanks. She's got personification of time. And time rolling its tanks. Tanks are associated with war. So the frontiers over here, the idea of barriers, walls, between us. She's being cut off from her country. Close like waves, and waves. You can't hold back waves. This is natural. It keeps going. This is unstoppable. So there's this idea here of this positive imagery of grace, white streets and glowing. And her vision of it becomes more and more positive as she's thinking of what's happening to it now. It's almost like it becomes more, the contrast makes her town, her country seem more beautiful. The contrast between now and then. So the positive of here with now, with its tanks and its frontiers and the barriers, makes it seem more, basically emphasizes its beauty. Let's say, actually write that, emphasizes how beautiful her country is. Now, and just, we've got this whole idea of it again, of the childlike. And to emphasize here, that child's vocabulary I carried here, like a hollow doll opens, spills a grammar. This is a language she learnt as a child. She's forgotten it. She's trying to hold on to it. Soon I shall have every coloured molecule of it. So she's trying to sort of hold on to the language of her country. Now, it's an interesting part there. It's like a hollow doll. There's no substance to it. It's almost like it comes out without meaning. It spills a grammar. The words are coming out. So she's trying desperately to hold on to this. It may now be a lie, banned by the state, but I can't get it off my tongue. So again, we come back to this idea of being banned by the state. It may be a lie. Notice again we've got this whole idea of, with the dictators, the tyrants, the tanks, this whole idea of power and control coming up. And it's contrasting with this sense of freedom and light. Remember, light's normally associated with freedom, hope. And her language tastes of sunlight, it tastes of freedom. And we get feeling that maybe it's freedom of speech. So if her language has been banned, so there's a lack of freedom of speech. Notice the language of uncertainty, which you see throughout this. If you look, one of the things you'll notice as we come through here, do you notice this? It may be at war, it may be, by now be a lie. There's a lot of ideas here of language of uncertainty. She doesn't know what it's like. She doesn't know what her country's like anymore. It might be this. This is what I hear, and this is where she is. She's in this, almost like she's caught. She can't move on because she's in a new place, but she doesn't want to let go of the place which is her home because she's been forced to move. She didn't want to. And we come down here for these last parts. I have no passport. There's no way back at all, but my city comes to me in its own white plain. It lies down in front of me, docile as paper. Again, notice the sense of light. We've got the white again. I comb its hair and love its shining eyes. My city takes me dancing through the city of walls. They accuse me of absence. They circle me. They accuse me of being dark in their free city. My city hides behind me. They mutter death, and my shadow falls as evidence of sunlight. So we finish with sunlight, even though look how dark this poem gets towards the end. So we start with over here, this feeling, I have no passport, there's no way back. So this growing feeling of darkness. But my city comes to me. Now, there's this idea here that she's got. Her city comes to me in its own white plain. It lies down in front of me, docile as paper. So you could argue that her view of her city is somewhat two-dimensional because she's a child's view. It's simple, childish. And you notice that I comb its hair and love its shining eyes. It's like a doll. So it's almost like she's personifying her city as a doll, something to be cared, which links in with this hollow doll over here. So maybe this all links together, this image of this doll. Because dolls are hollow, they look pretty, but there's nothing much underneath, and that's maybe like the substance of her memory. So it looks pretty in her memory, but it's not real. And so that nice, this part over here with our comets here, and I'll just underline that because this is this part that we're talking about. My city takes me dancing through the city of walls. Now there's another interesting idea there. So my city takes me dancing through the city of walls. There's two cities. There's the city of her memory and the city of the news. So the city of her memory and the real city. Notice this one, city of walls. So again, barriers. These are walls are to do with being trapped. And notice this last spell here where we come up. They accuse me. We don't know who they are. So it's quite interesting at this point. And I'm going to, with this idea of the tyrants. They accuse me. They circle me. They accuse me. They mutter death. So you see this building up of oppression in that repetition. It builds up. Now, there's a couple of ways you could read this last part. You could read this, first of all, this could be the people in the city, the tyrants, saying, we've freed the city and you're not doing this. It could also be how the people in her new city are treating her. of being dark in their free city. So that could be a reference to prejudice, discrimination of some sort. So there's two ways you could read this. What's interesting there is my city hides behind me. She's protecting the memory of her city. Again, it's childish. So she is protecting the memory of her city. And that last part there, just to show how much, and we do end on a note of optimism here. At the end of this, I'm going to put this down here because I'm going to run out of room. Finishes, and I think it finishes on a note of optimism. Finishes with hope or optimism for the future. Because although the shadows are dark, and they're to do with darkness, and it goes back to that idea of November in darkness we saw before. She talks about it falling as evidence of sunlight. So, in other words, you can't have light without shadows. They go together. So it's this idea of almost needing shadows. To emphasize the light. So she's not going to focus on the darkness. She's going to focus on the light. Now, so really nice poem to have a look over this one. Simply because, first of all, we're looking in this poem, the main theme that comes up as you go through this, and I'll write this at the top so you've got it. But when we're looking at the themes for this one, this is definitely, you've got power and conflict in this. If I was going to put it down to one in particular, I'd go definitely for power. Think about for this one. This poem's all, you could argue it's about power, it's about misuse of power and abuse of power. And because of that, it goes really nicely with William Blake's London. The light imagery in this one makes it compare quite nicely to the idea of this whole idea of letting light change things. For the light imagery, I would actually say it's a nice comparison to tissue. And that feeling of hope. Despite all that darkness, there is hope. So that's where I would say link to tissue. So remember, you have to be able to do a developed comparison to another poem. This is a nice start, but basically we've got a poem here which is about refugees, which is about a political refugee leaving a country which is war-torn, but because of leaving it as a child, almost pink, her view of her country is not the reality. There's this fairy tale feeling, and that fairy tale feeling is got through those images of light, which are those highlighted parts throughout the poem. And also that the doll. Oh, I missed the doll imagery. I should have underlined that one. Okay, and that whole idea of a doll, holding on to a doll, something from your past, from your childhood. And these are the parts that make this such a great poem to analyse. And again, something to which you can say lots of clever things. So I would focus on this, the green, which is that language to do with tyranny, and all of the highlight parts, which is the light, which is associated with hope, and the pink, which is the child's view. I hope that all makes sense. Any questions? I will be on Teams. Come and ask. Apart from that, thank you guys, and looking forward to seeing you sometime soon. Bye.